What's up, everybody? Little Big Robots here with a quick video. I thought it'd be, I don't know if I would call it interesting, discussion about something I've always kind of dealt with, but it's not a problem, but it's something I'm very interested in. I guess you could say that. And that would be my ability to speak, or my issues with speaking sometimes. It's like I said, it's not a problem, but it's something I think about a lot when I go back and listen to old podcasts, which I've been doing since 2008, or even when I read old posts, forum posts, blogs, stuff like that. And that is essentially when I sometimes listen back to old stuff or read old stuff or whatever, I kind of am flabbergasted at some of the things I've said. Not in a bad way. I'm not like ashamed or anything like that. There's a few things that were not like me to say, but I've never been... I'd like to think that I've always been on the right side of social issues and stuff like that, so I'm not worried about that. But it's the way I have issues completing points, finishing points. I tend to always get around to the point eventually. I like taking a long way around, but that's more due to the fact that I will branch off a thought in the middle of a thought. So a lot of this will not sound unfamiliar to a lot of you. I don't want any sort of advice in the comments about, oh, you might have this, you could have that, go check out that, take this pill or whatever. I'm almost 50 years old, so I'm lucky enough to have access to medical, professionals if I ever need them, and I've never felt that I have. But if you've listened to me for a while, or if you've read my posts, if you've known me on the internet, or if you've been a friend of mine, a family member, I think that I tend to be a bit exhausting sometimes to listen to. I exhaust myself sometimes. And there's a few things that I'd like to bring up to see if it sounds familiar to a lot of people, which I'm sure it does. I think it probably sounds familiar to 90% of people. So one of the things I've had since I was a kid was, when I was a kid, the version of it when I was a kid was that I always pictured there were cameras always watching me, like filming me. I know that immediately sounds kind of strange, but it's really not. It was just more of a consciousness that I was always performing, and not performing in a dishonest way, like putting on a performance, but always being part of a performance. I don't believe in any type of divine power, and I'm not a religious person. In fact, I'm embarrassed when people bring up their religion. I'm like, it's kind of like talking about something that's so private and kind of strange that I don't want to talk. It's like talking to me about your bowel movements or something. It's important to everybody, but that's your thing. That's your journey. I don't think that there are actually any type of recording devices around me. I know that is not happening, but I've always had that feeling since I was a kid. Later on, I realized that the feeling stemmed from the fact that we have two individuals in our brain. We have the person we are, that we do things or whatever, and then we have the person who is aware of those things, might judge those things. So it's like a split personality in a way, without using too harsh or inaccurate term. And so when I was a kid, I think I imagined that as somebody paying attention and recording me, whatever. I was always drawn to playing in bands, stuff like that, because I loved the feeling of time passing by when you play a song, when you play in a show or you play in a band. I also really enjoyed the social aspect of it. I love socializing. I love having a group of friends, a gang, type of thing. And it also kind of, when I would perform, since I was going through an actual performance, a literal performance, I think it made me feel more at ease, because it was like a natural conversation for me. So what I tend to do is I'll start to make a point. I'll do this even in my head. I do it at work, to the point where I'm known to go a little too fast. I go really fast when I'm helping people, if I'm dealing with coworkers, all that kind of stuff. I'm really, really fast to the point it's I need to slow down. It's something I'm always working on. But I tend to start on one point, and as I'm making that point, I'm thinking of the next, not the point after that, but the grand point that it connects to. So I'll start talking about my love for my cat, but then in the back of my head are ready to go, almost overriding the original point, which is my love for my cat, is, let's say, a discussion on domesticating cats and should we keep pets or not. And you know what I mean? I'm sure everybody, in fact, I'm almost 100% sure everybody goes through this. But what I think happened when I was a kid is I grew up in a large family. We had 7 kids, so 9 people altogether. All of us were creative or smart. You know, we all had book intelligence and loved to discuss deep things and all that fun stuff. And I was never discouraged from that. I was never really told by my parents or my brothers or my sisters who were the same way, you know, calm down, stop talking. So I've never I was never really quite taught that polite inhibitance, if that's even a word, in inhibition that makes you pull back a bit in conversations and give and take a little bit more, or to form a point and stay on that point. So I've thought about it a lot, and there's a few tools I use to help. There's 2 main tools I use to help when I feel this way. For example, when I did a podcast the other day and I wasn't comfortable with how I spoke, but I was a little tired, so I have to always have an appropriate amount of sleep. I can't be drunk or too much on caffeine, because that will unlock my blabbermouth. So it's kind of a sweet spot I have to be in when I'm doing a conversation, a recorded conversation. But when I don't have access to all the sleep in the world, or lack of caffeine or whatever, because we have to record when we can record, or when I used to have to record for shows, for guesting on other shows, and I just wasn't in the mood, but I had to perform, I had to record. The main 2 tools I use are, 1, notes. So physical notes on a yellow pad. Like I've got yellow pads down here I'll keep physical notes on. That helps a lot. But at the same time, when I see the notes, I tend to do what I do in my head normally, which is think of the next point, which is the next point on the note. And so I start to try and almost form a narrative story with my points and my discussion that will lead up to that next point, and the next point, with this grand arch of, you know, storytelling. I don't know what that is. I don't really care, because I'm not uncomfortable being that way. I would just like to get it a little more in control, because when I do need to perform more properly, write something or talk, or at work have a meeting, give a meeting and all that stuff like that, I would like to be able to do that a little bit more. I know this sounds like I'm trying to sound cool or something, but a little bit more where people understand it. Understand what I'm saying? That's not me saying that I'm ununderstandable or you can misunderstand me, but I can be hard to follow because I can make 3 points in one sentence. I'm not saying it's a smart thing or anything like that. I'm just saying it's a thing that I do. I'm sure all of you do this. But being that I wasn't inhibited as a kid, in school, when I would talk too much, or I used to just draw in class all the time. I would never do homework. After about 8th grade, when I was 12 or 13, whatever grade that would be, 7th grade, when I really discovered girls, puberty and all that stuff like that, and discovered bands, I was just too cool for school, so I would just draw and draw and draw. I was in like an advanced class thing It was like an experimental class. You'd learn languages and do tests and fun stuff. They stopped that program, and I remember distinctly when that happened. I just gave up. I was like, and so I would just draw all class, 6 hours, 7 hours, however long school was, and people would watch me draw, and the teachers would be really angry. I had one teacher who'd make fun of me and make fun of my art because she was frustrated with me, which was ridiculous. I was in 6th grade. Her name was Mrs. Ward. But in that period, I wasn't worried about grades because while I think education is important, I knew then that school, the way it was set up, was just complete crap. Like, you weren't really being taught. You were being taught to memorize. You weren't being taught to think, to analyze. And this is years ago, many years ago, almost 40 years ago, of course, which nowadays they're much better about trying to teach critical thinking because they have to, because of the internet now. But they still lack in that area here in the U.S. So throughout school, I was never challenged as well with, attempting to calm down, complete one point at a time, right? So if I keep notes, they help, but they don't quite help, because notes are just your thoughts written down on paper. So I already have access to those. The problem I have is completing one point at a time on a checklist to tell a story. That's how you tell a story. You go dot dot dot. It's a linear thing. It can't be in that movie Arrival, I think it is, when the aliens come down and they're writing in a language. It's a circular, like a blob of ink, and they're trying to figure it out, and blah blah blah, and time travel and all this stuff, whatever it was. That's how I actually kind of picture when I'm having a discussion with somebody, is this, all points are made at one time and you just connect them. And it's just a bit, I don't want to say frustrating, but it can be frustrating when I don't seem to get my point through to somebody. So it's not so much that I want to change how I do things. It's more that I want to make sure that I'm able to communicate with other people, because I love other people. I love humanity. Yes, it's a garbage fire, but I still love humanity. I like being around people and having discussions, and it's fun, especially about toys and stuff. So notes work, but they don't work all the way. What I find is the most useful to me is what I've been doing during this recording for the most part. It's what I do if I find that I'm getting lost in a story a little bit. And that is to literally think of the next word in the sentence that I am speaking right now. I'm sure this is a common trick for a lot of people. So I might start to think, let's discuss the quarter results at work, or whatever, quarterly results at work. So what I tend to do is think of the big picture first. I'll think of, what were the quarterly results? How did they compare to last year at this time? Numbers, this, graphs and stuff, and then start picking points from that cloud of information. I have to have patience. I have to force myself to have patience to be like, let's start from the basics of the story. Let's build the rest of it from the basics. Do you know what I mean? So I think sometimes I feel a little impatient, or that other people will be a little impatient when you're not getting to the point right away. So that's why I tend to start a point, try to cover all my bases in that point, and then finish the point, because I want to make sure I'm like, let me get all this in at once. You need to hear all this. It's important to say that I believe wholeheartedly this is also something that comes from a position of privilege. If a lot of you hear that word and tend to think of it as some kind of buzzword nowadays, it was built to shame successful people. It's not. It's simply a word that explains that I didn't have as many challenges in certain areas of life as other people in the same areas of life for various reasons. And being a young man growing up in Midwest, I got away with so much. I still get away with a lot if I needed to, you know. But I being raised that way, never really questioned. I was always responded to with other deep points and stuff. You know, when I was a kid, you got to be careful because you'll start to think that people need to hear what you have to say. Nobody cares really. Of course, people care, but you know what I'm saying. Like everybody has the points they want to make, and so for a man like me, it's taken many years to understand that the point of a conversation is not they say something, I say something. It's more of a dance. It's supposed to be an exchange of information. You know, it could be for pleasure, it could be for scientific research, whatever. But the point is to kind of dance a bit because you have to pause and let the other person go and back and forth. But if I'm thinking of my next point when the other person is going, it's not really getting anywhere. So I try to think of the base minimum of the conversation, like the very base of the conversation, which is word by word by word by word. And I'm trying to not worry about if the point gets made or not, because nobody really gives a shit. I mean, you know what I'm saying? If they're listening to me, they might care. But it's not really about making a point. It's about discussing something. So that's really the only tool I found that really helps, is literally seeing the words arranged on a sentence, a linear line, and just going by the words and trusting that my point is made. So I don't do a lot of, I'm definitely not jealous of public speakers, or I'm not jealous of YouTubers or anything like that. I definitely do not like scripted content. I don't dislike it, but you know, it's just when there's scripted content for no point, no reason, you don't have to script it. Just put some notes. And I go to YouTube for people to be themselves, not to be a program necessarily. While I'm not like jealous of that stuff, I do enjoy listening to people who speak slowly and pause a lot. And that's not what I do. And so I've thought about that, like, why is that? And I think it's generally, I'm sorry, I keep refreshing my screen here. I think it's because in general, I want each word of the sentence to have some weight to it, or have the points that I'm making have some weight to it. If it's just a casual conversation, not a lot of weight, but I want to contribute to the discussion. I want to have meaningful discussions with people. I enjoy that sort of thing. I like nothing more than meeting a new person and just getting to talk to them about their stuff. I'm a real bullshitter. When repair guys and stuff come over, repair people, they're probably sick of me because I'll sit there and talk to them and stuff. I love talking to Uber drivers. I love hearing their stories because I've met so many, like the last guy I met was from, I can't remember, it's a war-torn country, and was over here to make a little money, sending it back home, that kind of thing. I met a guy who was an older guy, and we talked about jazz for a while, and I'm not even a big jazz person. I don't know a lot, except for the stuff as a kid and the stuff I like now. But we had he was suggesting groups, and I was writing them down, and I love that stuff. So I'm trying to get good at that tit for tat, because I'm getting to the age where I'm just going to be doing a lot of talking. I'm not going to be as physically active. I'm going to be more mentally active, because when I was a kid, literally climbing the walls. I've been a drummer most of my life. I need to get back into that, by the way. You know, more physical stuff. I was a physical painter, and used ink and pens and paper and stuff. And these days I'm still physically active, but I'm much more of a cerebral person. So I need to get better at the exchange of ideas during a conversation, if that all makes sense. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there, see what you all thought. If you have some similar thoughts about it, feel free to put it in the comments, if you even stuck through this whole video. I'm not really worried about that. I just thought I'd put it out there. I don't want any analysis or anything like that. I have doctors for that. Unless you're a doctor, welcome. Thank you. But what I would like to hear is if you have similar issues or thoughts and what you've done about it. For me, like I said, for me, organizing your thoughts with notes and with pausing and thinking of the next word is important. But then if I go too far, it reiterates the same problem, which is to say that I'm thinking 3 points down the road. Do you know what I mean? Like, probably because I think it's an important point to make, when in fact all the extraneous stuff that I'm add on doesn't really matter. The base point is enough. I've said enough. I've got to stick to that. So it's something I'm working on. It's been kind of a fun, for lack of a better term, an interesting mental health thought experiment I've been working on the last few years, along with some other stuff. And it's not been a problem. But as I get older, I actually find that the thoughts in my head actually tend to go faster. Like, I get more and more random thoughts in my head compared to when I was a kid. And that has to do with when you're younger, you're more obsessed. You easily get obsessed by one thing. Like, I was such a drummer artist. It's all I was going to do is play drums, be an artist, and write. That's all I did. I did it 8 hours, 10 hours a day. And you just get obsessed, that youthful passion. And when you get older, you get into a million other things, or your brain has more information in it. And so you tend to have a harder time concentrating on one thing at a time. At least I do. So anyway, I thought that'd be kind of something to put out there. I've been on camera for a while. I got hair. I just took a shower. I don't like having my wet hair after a shower. So got some more reviews coming up, stuff. Got some stuff here, got some stuff there. So let me know what you think. And subscribe if you want to, if you like little robots. I don't always talk about this stuff ever, so just thought I'd throw it out there. Have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye.